This is Nina G, and I am the host of the Comedy Time Capsule. Today is May 16th, and AJ DeMello is joining me. Hello, AJ. How are you?
I'm good, doing pretty good. Just shined up my forehead, so it looks good in the camera, you know?
Well, and everybody watching should know that we just had a wonderful conversation that was an hour and 10 minutes long about really insightful things that I forgot to turn the video on. So we're doing this again. So AJ, thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. We're doing it again. So AJ, I know a little bit about you now. You have a comedy special coming out. Can you talk a little bit about that, when that's going to be out, and what the process was?
Yeah, so it's a stand-up special with Upward Rising Upward Rising Development with Dan Frank and my brother Noel DeMello. We filmed about like a 25-minute stand-up special on March 3rd that we got done as fast as we could to meet the 4/20 deadline. Typically 2 to 4 days when you submit a video to Amazon for it to upload, but the pandemic hit hard by the time we were able to submit. And today it's actually been a full month since we submitted. So, but it was a fun process. I knew about it as far back as about November, December of last year that it was going to happen. I told them I was only willing to do 20 to 25 minutes because that's all the amount that I have developed I'd feel good about putting out there. Because like how I mentioned before, I kind of tossed a lot of my material like 4 years ago and kind of started from scratch. This is an effort, one of my first results of the effort of trying to be as consistent as possible and not being inconsistent, because that used to be my thing. It would 50-50 like a lot of my jokes. So I just threw a lot of them out, and you gotta be consistent.
And can you say a little more about that? Because I know you work with the Deaf Puppies, and you talked a little bit about how that kind of upped your game in terms of making your comedy better. Can you say more about
that? Yeah, the Deaf Puppies started by Chris Teixeira. He had a deaf dog, and just friends of his that did stand-up, he just kind of called them the Deaf Puppies one day, and then I got added to it along with my other friends, Taylor Evans and Connor Martin, and them along with Anthony K., Saul Trujillo, those kind of guys in the Deaf Puppies, seeing them just kind of kill it all the time and living in the same area as them, wanting to be friends with them, becoming better friends with them. You want to be able to not be the person in the show where they're like, that was inconsistent. You want to, and that's what they said too. You want to be remembered. You got to be consistent. And if you're not, if you're doing a bunch of stuff that's kind of 50-50 rather than all these are worked out, you're not going to be too successful.
And you said that you took stuff out of your act that was more delivery based, and that was the inconsistency, is that you really had to sell it in order for it to work, but then you wanted to go more toward the content. Is that accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was, kooky stuff I come up with that hit half the time, but the writing, I wasn't going as far in the writing and being as self-aware as I try to be now. I've got a few comics I can run stuff by, and they're not afraid to tell me that this doesn't make sense. This doesn't work. That's one of my biggest problems is I'll come up with something that's funny, and then it kind of takes me, a couple of weeks to kind of spin that ball around and figure how it lines up and how I can make sure the audience understand what I think is funny. It's hard. My brain doesn't work like it should. So like I'll come up with things that make me laugh, and then people are like, "What does that mean?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, I got some work to do." Like I don't have probably with like close to half of the things I come up to, but it makes it that much more rewarding when I can take that joke that a friend was like, "This doesn't make sense or doesn't work," and get that to work. You know, that's a fun feeling too. Is like, when, it doesn't seem like this is headed anywhere, but if you have a certain belief in something that's funny, that's what you have to come back to when you're doing jokes. Like, okay, what was funny? How do I make them see this as funny too? And that's not as easy as you'd think it could be sometimes.
And doing that, so you had to do that for this special. You've had to do that for the material that you've always worked on, and having that self-awareness. Are you able to do that kind of writing in the same way now? And you had mentioned that you do some Zoom shows. You host a Zoom show once a week. You've been on a few others. Are you able to develop your material in that same way?
If I didn't have a few comics that we could run material by each other, it would be much more painstaking process, because you're relying like probably 50% of the time on comedians a lot of times in these Zoom shows or mics, because a lot of these audience members, even if you think you have a good amount, they'll end up muting themselves, or you have to mute them. So it ends up being you need comics help in this. So that's not always a great thing to have, because it's like you don't want to be the guy that's trying to make the people in the back of the room laugh, So that's what can be rough about trying to run stuff by comics. Even though I just talked about how I have individual comics I run it by, but those guys I know aren't afraid to just be like, this doesn't make sense, or this is off, or because I can't tell you how much I see this in comedy, Nina, where there's people that get led to believe they're better than they are because their friends let them believe that they are, rather than just kind of pull them close and just try and be real with them. I mean, if possible, just be like, hey, look, this doesn't work, or this doesn't work, or can I help you with this, or do you realize that joke didn't work? Like, that's why the Deaf Puppies, all of us got, good enough, is we weren't afraid to be like, hey man, that thing didn't work, or you need to fix that, or that joke is really good, don't drop that, also saving each other lines that we heard and stuff like that. But I don't know.
What do you think it is about the Deaf Puppies that makes all of that work? Like, is it the people who are in it? Is there certain elements? Is it?
Well, I mean,
how did that happen with them and not with everyone else?
Well, I mean, living in the Central Valley with these guys, I come in contact with them more than like other comics. And it's more than just like wanting another comic. You see sometimes like their respect. It's like, these are also like your friends. So it's like, even if I wasn't a Deaf Puppy when I went with them to some places, if I didn't have that good of a set, I make the rest of us look bad. We're still from the same place, so there's a certain aspect around wanting to bring respect to where I guess you come from or come out of, or
representing your family kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hear a lot of comics always saying that, so I really like that perspective. So, okay. And so you've been developing the material for your special. Can you say a little bit, because it sounded like the special was supposed to happen in January, but then you had some family stuff, and then it was filmed later. Can you talk about some of that process and the chronological?
Yeah, so we set it up to film at Shea Root Lounge in Modesto in the middle of January because it was the best place to film a special because it's small, it's short ceilings, everyone's in the dark, and it's technically my hometown or one of my whatever you want to call it. It was in Modesto, so it just made more sense to do that there rather than try and take one shot at a punchline that hopefully I'd be able to fill up. So that's why Shea Root was the option. And we were going to film in the middle of January, but my father passed away. And I didn't want to film a few days later because it's also going to be dedicated to him. So I was like, well, I mean, I could just go through with doing this, or I could give it some space and try and use it as therapy, really, like I had mentioned to you in the last video, just trying to write jokes about stuff that kind of sucks in your life, emotional or not. I only got a couple of jokes out because I only had a month between when I canceled and then set it up for like March 3rd, essentially. So there wasn't as much stuff from my dad as I would have liked, but that's why it was like a month compared to like doing it in a couple weeks from then. And it would have been up on Amazon on 4/20. We submit it. Usually it takes 2 to 4 days to get up on Amazon, but the pandemic changed it to 21 plus days. And we just finished 21 business days. It's a month ago today that we submitted this thing. So it's frustrating. I've even had like the Modesto Bee in my hometown paper, Half Moon Bay Review. They wrote stuff that it was already out or it's coming out on 4/20, and I just feel bad when people ask me about it, but it should be out next week, theoretically, technically. Write Amazon. Tell them you're pissed too.
I'm pissed. I want AJ DeMello on my Prime, on my Amazon Prime.
We want it now.
Well, yeah, and this is a side note. I may take this part out, but I had to, with my book, I had to promote myself for a lot of morning shows. And now with you could promote yourself in Memphis. You could promote yourself in Minneapolis. So it's these markets that are smaller because you're going to be on Zoom anyway. It's not like you have to go travel there. So you could just like spread it everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, my hope was, I started a Zoom show called We're Weird Fridays at 7:30. Just follow my @HumorousFiend if you guys want to check that out. But God, what was my train of thought? I'm so sorry.
About promoting it?
Oh, I mean, I was thinking with the people that are still the stay-at-home orders, like LA, for instance, but also some of those smaller ones, trying to spend some money advertising myself, but Dan, who's in charge of this and paid for all of this, he's got a plan to market this in like this is what he calls the soft opening still. So we could still end up making changes to this video, but promoting, I really have no idea how it's going to go. I just know that on Facebook, if it seems like I could get at the very least 3,000 to 8,000 more people to at least see that this is out there than wouldn't have. So I'm just gonna kind of hope for that, and hopefully word of mouth if people like it. Just we need those stay-at-home orders keep lifting like they did in Stanislaus. So that's what gets me a little peeved about this whole 21 plus days. But I'm on their time. Gotta let it come out.
Nothing you can do. So what made you get into comedy?
Well, always kind of made my friends laugh a little bit. But when I went to junior college at College of San Mateo, I wanted to become like a sportscaster, like for football. I wanted to be like the next Rich Eisen. And I did this extra credit class where just for fun, I came up with like 4 sketches, comedy sketches, and we put them together and we showed them to the class and they did really well. And that's when I kind of realized, okay, I think this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, because also the sportscasting thing, if you're not a former player, the chances of you squeaking through the cracks of being a regular player talking about football are slim to none, or they take a long time. So that was also like a push in the direction of, okay, if I'm going to go into a category that's somewhat unrealistic for success from the outside looking in, better be comedy where I don't have to work for somebody else. I'm just working for myself, technically.
And what was that first step in doing comedy besides at the college?
Well, I put myself in speech therapy courses before even getting on stage the first time. And also I joined, I tried out and made.
You mean speech classes or speech therapy classes?
Like speech communication.
Okay, yeah.
Interpersonal communication. So like I came up with like little scripts for like acting out in those classes with other people, and we do readings and stuff like that. But it was just all about getting me comfortable in front of a crowd. That's why at Kenyatta College, when I went there to take an acting course, tried out for the improv team, got on there for the semester. Next semester, I ran the improv team. By then I was doing stand-up, and it's it really helps, because even with that, it took me like a year or two to get comfortable enough to hide that I'm kind of in my head a little bit about, all right, well, that joke didn't work, so I gotta cut that next joke that connected, or like whatever kind of math you got to do that when you're starting out might cause you to show more that you're freaking out, where it's more of a controlled chaos now the more you're up there, where it's like you don't look like you lost your shit, but up here you might be fumbling for the next joke and nobody knows that you don't know what's coming, so the stuff like that.
It's not only that comics have to write, come up with material, hone the material, deliver the material, but then it's what's going up in their head. And a lot of times that going up as much as you can in that first few years is to desensitize yourself, just so you can have a meta thinking about what's going on.
Yeah, it's probably even more important to get up as much as possible in the first few years, because as good as it is to get up on a record-breaking amount of mics every week, I feel like there is a certain part where you're getting diminishing returns. You gotta, you want to get up. I think if you're getting up anywhere from 4 to 5 times a week on average, I think you're doing real well for yourself. 3 times should probably be your minimum if possible, because life is pretty crazy and, shit happens. You're not always going to be able to make it for some reason or another to shows or mics and stuff like that. But yeah.
Let me see here. Say a little bit about how your life has changed, either in terms of performing or writing, now that we're in a 7-week lockdown, 8 weeks, whatever it is.
Well, I think the biggest change is, not just that you're doing a Zoom where some people are even muted or you can't even see them. So it's like you kind of almost have to rely on some of the comics to not mute themselves and hopefully enjoy the show, which kind of sucks. But I still appreciate them. Especially because I like to work on material that if I told you the premise for, nobody would say that's something to write a joke about, maybe. Like something truthful that's kind of messed up. So I will tend to put myself out there because there's something about being able to come up with a joke that especially starts out edgier than it turns out to be. There's something about doing a self-deprecating joke or a joke just about a truth that when you get it to work and when it's a really good feeling, because those are some of the hardest things, and especially on Zoom, because at least at the clubs or even some of the bars, the lighting, if you get people in the darkness, they'll laugh at anything that they think is actually funny. Where if, you know, you got people on Zoom or even people that were in regular crowds, if they're completely lit, they're self-conscious about laughing at things because they can see Susie and Mr. Burgers over here can see what they're laughing at, a suicide joke or whatever joke, rather than just trying to enjoy themselves. You know, I think, and with Zoom, you don't even, at least when you tell a joke and it doesn't go over, that's kind of edgy or like you put yourself out there and it doesn't work. When you're in front of a crowd, you can corral them a little bit more. It's easier to have like a one-off line to kind of diffuse the tension. Whereas I told a joke on Zoom last week that I still feel right here like a dagger when I got nothing for. And it makes me not want to even try those kind of jokes on Zoom, but I'm such a fiend that I can't rule it out. I love making jokes because it's also therapy too. I've been through a lot of messed up stuff, so I guess it's cool to be able to make jokes about stuff I've been through.
Well, and you, of course, the first time you had said this, you said it so beautifully that it's like there's a veil with the audience. That they are veiled in a live show because it's dark and there's all those elements.
With the whole, once you turn off the lights, I'm not thinking about anybody else, what they think of my sense of humor. I'm just watching someone with no distraction. You get like a protective cover in the darkness. You can chill in the darkness and laugh at the stuff you wouldn't be able to at the office, or, you know, stuff like that. So being in the light, those things don't work out as well. And on Zoom, it's even harder because people aren't even next to each other. So like someone might laugh and that makes someone else feel like, oh, I guess that is okay to laugh. There's not really that going on either. Whereas this is like everyone's on different screens. Some are muted. Some you can't even see. You know, I'm not even looking at the audience most of the time when I do these shows. Maybe I should be more, but it's like half these people don't have their screens on or their sound on, so it almost feels like a waste of time.
Yeah, there is that thing, and non-comics may not know this, but like when I go to shows with my non-comedy friends, I feel pressure that I have to look at them when I laugh, because there's like an agreement of the people at the table, like, haha, that was funny, and that does not happen on Zoom. And so it's that collective group interaction is different. Also, that veiled thing, when you talk about that, it makes me think about being a Catholic, and I haven't been to confession in a very long time. But when I used to go, it was me on this side, a screen, and then the priest on the other side. And the priest looks like this, like he doesn't look at you directly. And part of that is to facilitate you telling your sins. And comedy is a lot of you telling your sins. And so having that veil in that situation helps. And so I don't always, like when you explain that, yeah, it's for the audience, but do you also find as the comic on stage in a live show that veil helps you to confess too?
Yeah, because you feel more comfortable, you know. I mean, it's always going to be a better show when the audience isn't lit up. If you light up a crowd, it doesn't mean you can't have a good show, but I guarantee you there's going to be people not laughing at things that they would have laughed at because they're self-conscious about other people seeing what they're laughing about, which sucks. But I think we're all probably guilty of it sometimes in our life, you know, like even as a comic, you know, you got to try and stop yourself from laughing sometimes. That doesn't even work.
You know, and Chris Doran, who I interviewed for this, mentioned that he hasn't done a lot of Zoom shows just because he feels kind of silly that like you're there and it's like telling jokes in front of your bathroom mirror, and like there's a self-consciousness that you feel too, and like in doing stuff that's a little more vulnerable and that is more about your own truth, alone in your house is a little more difficult. I think a lot of people now, besides Zoom shows, are also doing therapy online, and I can't imagine having a really tough session, being in therapy and then knowing what to do with that. Like I could always leave it in my therapist's office, but now I'm home and what do I do with that? Was that kind of when you performed and it didn't go well? Was that kind of your thing? Like, now I'm here alone with this?
Yeah, it's like, because it's like you show your worst scars that you wouldn't show normally anyways. So it's like, it's the worst way you can bomb a joke, to be honest. It's because it's something that actually happened too. So it's like, because when you get like a look from somebody in the crowd, like maybe you just made that up for a joke, that can be really frustrating. It's like, no, that really happened. I don't want you to feel bad. I just didn't get it how I should have this time around, you know? That's even worse is when someone goes, "Aw," it's like, no, you don't aw, don't that's the maybe the worst heckle.
That is the pity moan. And I had a joke about that because in like the Berkeley, Oakland, like the super liberal areas, a lot of times with my stutter, instead of laughing at my stuttering jokes, there'd be women there who would do, uh, uh, and it's like, you're taking away my power. And like, if you wanted to do this in my everyday life, I would love to get your empathy and your sympathy, but you don't. You save it when I'm on stage, and fuck you for that.
It's another reason why people feel the need to speak up sometimes when you tell a joke that they feel offends them. It's the same thing.
Say more about that.
Well, because especially in the day where, you know, people want to be woke, they want to have the right opinion. I feel like people just want to have something to be angry about or something that they feel like they need to fight for. That's why you'll see someone at a comedy show in a wheelchair laughing at a comedian's joke about a disabled person or someone in a wheelchair. And there'll be a person that doesn't even know them standing up behind them and be like, "How dare you make a joke about that man?" Or it'll be their, or even worse for them, it might be their actual spouse or something getting mad for them. Because that's terrible when you see that kind of thing. It's like you just tried to self-righteous yourself when it didn't even offend this guy or girl in the first place. You know, that's actually maybe the worst heckle. But it's just when you feel like an awe or like an actual, like, especially when it's not even that sad and someone does that and you can't really recover. It kind of wipes the slate a little bit when someone makes a noise like that, you know?
No, and it just impacts you in a way that like it's hard to be pissed off on stage and work through that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's what kind of saves it, is finding the right amount of being pissed off but still trying to be funny about it. And that's what makes it easier when you're in front of crowds, because you can kind of corral them and like, you know, you're making eye contact and there's like a synergy. We're like connected a little bit, where Zoom, it's like I could cut out the video right now or sound if I wanted to, you know. It's, you're not forced to be here in the moment with me, you know. You could unplug at any time. It's different.
Yeah, it's a different way to develop your material. But is there anything that has helped you on Zoom in the new platform?
Well, I mean, I didn't want to do the Zoom stuff at first, but then with the special coming out, I knew I was going to need more material, and setting up Zoom shows like my own and then getting on mics and getting on other people's shows, it gives you something to work towards, where in the everyday life I was before, we had mics we knew we could hit. We knew shows we knew we were going to be at. We had deadlines constantly. So there was a little bit more of a kick in the ass to get this joke retooled in a short amount of time. So like I found myself still writing, but kind of in a fumble a little bit, because it's like, well, what's the point? Whereas once I started doing the Zoom stuff, well, this isn't a great version of stand-up comedy. It's something, and it's a way to flex this muscle rather than just trying to write or podcast and hoping that's going to take care of me getting over whatever hump I need to when I get back on stage, you know.
What was it about doing online shows that you were so reluctant about? Was it like, oh, comedy's going to come back, it'll be fine, or just not kind of liking the platform? What exactly?
Well, I didn't believe it could work at first, or I think also that's just a part of, you know, a childish part of myself that's just like, well, I'm not gonna do that, or I'm not gonna try that because it's not gonna work, you know. And then I think like a couple of weeks went by and I was like, you know, I have friends that were like making some good money on these shows too, and I was like, well, you know what else am I gonna do? And it's actually gonna give me the deadlines I need to get this new material out, you know, because I do like to write, but when you don't have a deadline, it's not that you can't be proficient or efficient in your writing, but it's like, all right, I've got this mic on Monday and it's Saturday night or it's Sunday night right now, so I've got to get it how I want to tell it. Or I've got this show on Friday, it's Wednesday night, that joke didn't work how I just retooled it. I've got another night to try and mess with it, or I can't use it on Friday. Like there's things like that you don't get if you're not doing Zoom shows right now. And I think that's so important as a comic to be, because we have to be able to fail, because that gives us more passion to try and correct it, or you know, get something good out of it, you know. So writing jokes, even if they suck, and then you still believe in it, so you work at it. Zoom gives you a reason to really work at it, whereas are you really going to work as hard on premises if you're not accepting that you're going to do Zoom shows? I mean, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite part about doing comedy and your least favorite part? Or did we kind of cover that with some of this stuff we talked about?
I don't know if that was in the first video we did or not, but if you want, I'll just mention how I think my favorite part is just the connection of, like, especially when you joke you tell the first time hits, like there's nothing like that feeling. It's like sex, or almost like sex, where it's like, yes, you know, when you get a joke to just hit, especially if you worked, even if you haven't worked on it that long, just getting a new joke, you're like, da da da, and they're like, oh, and you're like, you're not getting that. You're getting a little single person that's got, you know, married with children on in the background too loud, so they have to be muted, and so you don't even know if you're making them laugh. So it's, I think I wrote down here that I think is very true. I'm starting to realize, I think we all know this, comedy at the end of the day if you want to tell someone why they should be maybe doing Zoom shows, comedy is about sacrifice and being able to adapt to any situation. Because if you're not willing to sacrifice, if you're not willing to suck, if you're not willing to try out different things, then how are you going to get better? And if you're not willing to adapt to any situation, oh, this crowd isn't laughing at dick jokes, or this crowd doesn't like it when people have gone to personal comedy. Like, there's certain things that maybe that doesn't make you go away from those jokes, but to have it in your mind, you have to be able to willing to change on a dime when you're doing stand up, you know. And I don't like going up there. I don't go up there and just go, I don't know what I'm going to do. I always know what I'm going to do, because that's my pet peeve. I've got to have a set list, and I'll deviate if I need to, but you know. But anyways, I wrote that down before. That's true. You got to be willing to sacrifice and adapt, or you're just not going to consistently get better, I think.
Is that on stage at a live show? Is that something to live by as a comedian? Does that apply to online shows? Like, can you dive into that more?
Sacrifice and adapt. I think we're all making a sacrifice doing Zoom shows right now. I mean, we are sacrificing whatever little, what's the word, morale or self-respect or whatever you might call it, to not do Zoom shows right away. And I get it more if you're like a name that's been putting out specials and maybe just do a little bit of charity work. I get that. But if you're not that, even if you're a headliner in some clubs, I mean, I think you got to be willing to, and I think the best do, they're willing to put stuff out there on stage that, you know, they have no idea how it's going to hit. Probably going to be a little offensive at first, but they're willing to adapt to what the crowd thinks over time and make it funnier. You know, you got to adapt to your surrounding or you're dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always said that comedy is like an act of resilience, that like resiliency is something happens and it goes badly, but you keep on going in spite of it going badly. If you have to have resiliency as a comic. I think it's a core thing. And I think like the sacrifice and adapt are then elements and tools of that resiliency. Would you add anything there?
I was just going to use the word persevere to make myself sound smart. Because I almost never, but that's essentially what, yeah. You got to, that's what I did to do the Zoom shows, get out of my own head. Just say, well, what are the benefits? I actually flex the muscle. I can actually make some money. And one thing we haven't touched on, the networking thing. That's not really happening if you're not doing shows and mics. So this actually gets you back into that aspect a little bit too. You know, that's one thing people don't talk about. Maybe one of the hardest things in comedy, because I've definitely asked people to be on shows and some of them don't reply. Some of them won't reply when I send a video, or they'll say no, and that's fine. But, you know, I've just come to the point in my life where I'm like, I don't give a fuck if I'm denied. I've gotta try, because you can't sit around expecting people to give you an opportunity, you know?
Yeah. And now the opportunities are also more broad too, because, you know, it's just not places you can drive a couple hours away from. It's everywhere now.
Yeah. What do you think of this whole drive-in stand-up comedy that some people are starting to do?
Where have you heard about that? Because I've heard about that, but that was a very particular thing that I heard.
Well, I've heard it through a couple of different comics, and I don't know if I should mention names or not, but it was also discussed with one of my friends had an idea to do that too, but the thing that we said maybe why it wouldn't work is because unless you're able to hear the audience, sure, they're closer to you and it's better than the Zoom, but you know, it's like I was telling a comic earlier today, as long as whoever's running those kind of shows is willing to be self-aware, realize what didn't work, what can be better, rather than just let's do it again. Because I know there's comics out there right now way smarter than me that are thinking of ways to do stand-up live, and I guarantee you there's going to be something soon, maybe in a couple months, but I feel like there's so many people working on something right now that is probably going to be the precursor to us getting back into the clubs, to be honest. That's like, we need comics. I'll try and think of some stuff too, but it's, you know, it's hard. Don't expect me to wear a mask, that's for sure. No.
Well, and we were talking about that what do you think, how will the performance of stand-up change once we start to get back into this? What do you think some of the barriers are?
Well, I think the oceans will rise, arcs will follow. No, I'm just kidding. I think audience members are going to want to wear masks, or it's going to be mandated that they wear masks and that they're separated by a certain distance. And maybe there might even be waiver forms involved. But I think the comedians have to not have a mask on, or it's got to be a really good see-through, because it's already going to be tough. We're going to have to adapt to it. Trying to do stand-up to people where you can't see their face. So if you can't even deliver a joke where they can see your mannerism or anything, then what's the point? You know, it's like you may as well just be doing a Zoom show where they can't see you and you're telling jokes at that point. You know what I mean?
And for me, it's always bugged me when guys have a baseball cap on and it's not backwards, because then then I can't see their eyes, you know, yeah. And now we're not going to be able to see people's mouths, but they do have masks for people that work with the deaf, so that it's a see-through mask. And that may be one option. I don't know. Or maybe that we don't have a front row, and that could be some other option. We could also offer a mic.
I can't wait for the first comic that gets painted as being offensive for trying to mock the disabled or something. Like, because like the way you just said, like some people do that to read lips and stuff. Like, yeah. All it takes is one person in the crowd with a block or something to be like, he was mocking the disabled. It was nothing like that. Like when people can even just see a possible offensive thing, because and deep down a lot of people want to be famous or have a moment in the sun or something. There's so many more people that are trying to take down others on like Twitter and social media and stuff. It's like, let me get some kind of personal gratification bringing this person down, when that person didn't even deliver it in such a way that was offensive.
Now, do you think, like, I think about, will the sensibilities of the world change in terms of their humor? And the whole reason why I started this show was because I had wondered if humor changed after the Black Plague or after the Spanish flu. Did like people go really, really dark then? Did they want jokes about death, or did they just want like, nobody talk about this, let's just all be in denial about it? And so I wanted to record this time for us, so that we kind of knew what life was before this and then after this. And so one of the things that I wonder about is, how is humor going to change in terms of those who are receiving it? And one of the theories that I have is that when you look at like Maslow's hierarchy, basic needs are at the bottom, and then you have like social interaction, and then you have these other things like status and self-actualization. So when your basic needs like toilet paper, like life or death, when those things are in question, do you worry so much about being offended by something that may not really be all that offensive? Do you think there'll be a loosening of that, or do you think that'll tighten up because people don't have any control over anything? What do you think it'll be?
I think it's going to be a mixture of some comics making jokes just to make jokes that are offensive, and they've probably been doing stand-up long, because there's definitely going to be people that want us to talk about it to a certain degree or touch on it to a certain degree. And I think people will be having their guards down slightly in terms of being offended because of what we just went through, because they want to be around other people. But it may not take that long when a comic that goes up before you, you know, the person that likes to throw the N-word into a freaking set because they think it might be funny when really they like the power of saying it. Just like how someone might like the power of making a COVID joke that's edgy or something, you know. Like, I'm more worried about people on shows or mics where we're trying to try out stuff that's, you know, going to be in our acts compared to people just going for shock value, because that's what's going to make life tougher for us. It's like when someone goes to a comedy show that isn't good because somebody messed up putting that show together, which is what happens a lot of the times. There's some people that weren't ready, or there's too many people that aren't consistent. You know, there's not enough of a mix, and then people go, oh, I guess stand-up sucks. Like, that happens to some people. I've seen it happen to some people. It sucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, bringer shows will, like what I tell people is, don't bring your friends to a bringer show if you really want to keep doing this. Because it's just going to happen. So, let's see. Is there other stuff that we haven't talked about in this one that we did at the last one that we should do more of now?
I think before you asked me a little bit about the the writing, or how I approached writing leading up to the special or something like that.
Yeah. Can you say more about that and how that's changed since all of this?
Yeah, I will spend like a lot of time just reorganizing like jokes, or like taking like different comic methods I've heard of, like writing out all your jokes on like pieces of paper, like a word or two, so you know what joke it is, and then just kind of going like this, like, is there anything that connects there, and just kind of mixing them. That can be helpful in making connections, because one of the first few set lists I put together for the special, I thought of maybe the best callback on the special just by going over stuff. And I do a lot of math and probably spend more time than I should on it, but there's something about, like, okay, I can't do this joke early because it's too silly and I don't understand my comedy, or I can't do this joke right here because I just did a darker joke, so then I'm just going to lose them maybe a little bit more, as opposed to trying to throw something silly there. Like, or like a self-deprecating joke is like perfect, like right after a dark joke, especially if it didn't even involve you. You know, you kind of bring yourself back down, so that way you can possibly talk down or make fun of something or somebody else. You know, there's so much math that is involved, at least for me, because I come up with stuff sometimes that can be seen as edgy, or I'll talk about stuff in my life, you know, that if I'm not on stage for a few minutes at a mic, I won't even approach some of these jokes. Like, I have certain like rules, you know, stuff like that.
Do you feel doing darker, more personal, more vulnerable stuff, you have to work into that? I mean, you can't just get up there and drop a bomb kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I think it's already tough to do stand up. So, like, that's why you don't see a lot of comedians lean into any self uh, jokes like that, or, they just want to up their chances of getting laid more. I don't know. They want to. They'll say they have a small dick. Okay, they'll say that. But fuck it. God, I forgot my train of thought again. What was the?
Okay. When I asked it, this is what I was thinking. There's
Okay.
that George Carlin where he comes on. First joke is an abortion joke.
Yeah, but that's
He
also
dives into it. None of us can really do that, right?
no, but that's also his crowd, though.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it kind of wasn't, because people walked out. Because there's always people that end up going to comedy shows with others that they don't understand, or they don't understand what they're getting into for that specific comic. So, like, something like a special like that, it's even crazier, because you're like, why would anyone walk out? They paid to see him. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily the case all the time. Like, people came because they were told it's going to be fun, but not everyone's ready for certain kinds of comedy. They got to be either buttered up to it, understand, or maybe see a little bit of their material, because they're just going to be really alarmed by it, or maybe even walk out in case of George Carlin talking about how a chicken beats the shit out of his hen, or doesn't beat him up, rather, because chickens are decent people, I believe the line.
Chickens are decent people. That I love that. Also, I really want to get like a picture, a painting at my job with a duck in it, just so in the morning I could say, look, there's a duck in there. I never noticed I don't know if you know that bit. That like the first 15 minutes of your job is your time. And you look at the painting and there's a duck in it. And it's like, oh, I never noticed that. Anyway.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. That's a obscure one. But he has a lot of good bird jokes. Can you say a little bit about his influence on you and what that was, and
Yeah.
how it's integrated in?
Carlin was the first comedian I saw that made me like laugh with my hand over my mouth, look around at people I'm watching comedy with, like, can you believe how crazy this is? It was the first specials, I should say. It was the You Were All Diseased, and then the one after that, which the second half of is one of the best 30 minutes in all of stand-up comedy. The list of people who ought to be killed, that's just an amazing bit. But he affected me, because it was just like, to see someone approach certain issues and be funny about it, that was like, that opened up a new world to stand up to me. And I mean, I didn't know I was going to be a comedian when I first saw him and stuff like that. It was probably around like 5 years later where I had an idea I was, but he influenced me enough to where I knew 6 months into doing stand-up, I was like, holy shit, I'm just doing George Carlin right now. Like, not his material, but some mannerisms, and that's what kind of what's interesting, is if you catch yourself doing that rather than someone telling you that, because you're almost like, why didn't anyone tell me? And it's like, well, it's almost better you kind of realize it yourself too. But
well, it's that self-awareness.
He had I was just saying, he had a huge influence, and it's kind of upsets me when I hear younger comics, or even comics around my age, that kind of scoff at Carlin in the sense of like, oh, he does all this political stuff and not a lot of it holds up, like as in you watch it today, or he's like the angry old man. But it's like, these are Carlin is like one of the pairs of shoulders of giants that we step on. Like, Like he set it all up. That's why when someone thinks like George Carlin's kind of hacky for doing like a political thing, it's like, well, you don't get it. What he was doing at that time was that nobody was really doing that. Like he switched to like, I'm just gonna call shit out and make jokes about it. So it's like now it's like people do that shit all the time. So it's like someone might see Carlin like, oh, I've heard that, or like that takes old, or oh, I get it. You know, it's like, but you don't get it. It's you know.
Well, and people like there are people who like his new stuff, or it's his more recent stuff, and then those who like his cutesy wordplay stuff from the '70s, and it's interesting to see which people go to which Carlin phase.
All of the specials are really good in their own way. I mean, from honestly, I think from 1990, I think Back in Town might be the newest one in the 90s at the early part, and then You Were All Diseased either came out in 99 or 2000. But those 3 or 4 specials in there are just so amazing. And it's when he's already been doing stand-up for so long too, when he was talking about how he became more of a writer at this point in his life. You know, because this was a guy that was also kind of, you know, he was being labeled as like a Cosby guy early on, like, you know, like a guy that's not a guy that's going to poison your drink so he can sleep with you, but a guy that's, you know, supposed to be well-mannered, seems like a good person, not going to joke about sensitive things. Like Carlin was kind of like a straight act where he was kind of goofy, but he didn't.
Like a Newhart kind, like the tie and the blazer, and then he went
hippie. Like he was, but then he, you know, he just came around to like, well, the hell with this. I want to do what I want, or he evolved, you know, and that's when he started getting kicked out of clubs and stuff like that. But you know, I guess there's something about a guy that's willing to just say something that's true and call it out and make a joke about it. That's fun.
And is that kind of the point? Is that kind of like what you look toward in comedy? Is that?
Well, not necessarily. I enjoy more making obscure stuff, but like I try to make my act as much about me as possible, because I feel like maybe the biggest trick I've learned, at least when it comes to my stand-up comedy, is the more I can bring it back to me, the better my set is overall. Because if you're just going, okay, here's this thought I had on this, and here's this observation on that, you can do that, but after a certain amount of time, if you don't have a certain amount of relatability, or you're putting yourself out there, or like trying to bring it back to you, and you're just commenting on things, no matter how hard you're killing, there's a certain amount of not as much of a connection between you and the crowd, I feel like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like they have to get to know you, and that is part of that process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to talk about, or something that I may have asked you before I clicked on record that you'd like to talk about, or just anything else?
I'm trying to think. Well, I think I had asked you a couple questions too.
Yeah.
I think I asked you what's your favorite method in terms of when you think of something funny, on how to get it to its completed form, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think for me, what it is like the things that I perseverate about, the things I obsessively think about, the things that make me mad 3 days after it's happened. And that's where I might be in a conversation with a family member or a friend, and I go off on that thing and like fuck this, and then I'm like, oh, this is something I should be talking about. And for me, what I bring onto the stage, like I'll try something out at an open mic, but if I don't feel it, like everything has to mean something to me which is not a great way to be as a comic. You don't like, you can just have fluff. You don't, not everything needs to change the world. But for me, it's like, oh no, everything has to have a meaning. So there's that. But for me, during all of this, what's been harder is, of course, not having mics and not trying stuff out, but also I'm not commuting because this is my office now. And the place where I would work a lot is driving, and that's where I would think about stuff because I'd have 2 hours a day that I'd have to drive. And that was actually really great because I would be able to process. And now I don't have that. And so I go out in my backyard and I try to just have some quiet time, but I've only done that once, and that's been it. So it hasn't been too successful in the transition.
We're all trying to adapt. It's not always the easiest at first, but this could be the way of stand-up for the next 4 to 12 months for all we know. So
yeah, no, and also what I think is that I think open mics will be more on Zoom, whereas shows, like, I think it's going to be comedy Darwinism, Darwinism to a certain extent, that the cream will be able to get live shows. And of course, we also know whoever kisses ass, that's the other part. So those two groups. But I really think that Zoom is going to be where we need to develop new stuff through open mics. And we've gone through about why that sucks.
Well, we just got to find a way to get actual people on there, because if we're trying to work out material just by having other comics listen to it, it's not going to be it's not the best. I mean, it's going to happen, but if that's like the thing every time, that's worrisome. So hopefully we get some more people in those mics if we're doing them exclusively online, because half the comics that are at mics anyways are just paying attention to themselves or what they're going to do in the first place. So it's like,
yeah. Well, and one of the things that we talked about in the first run of this was, if you do have vulnerable material, to try to do it with people that you know.
Yeah.
So that everybody is attentive. You can do it. Everybody has their screens on. It's like a writing group, but kind of like group the therapy too.
Yeah. I'm on a daily basis, I'm probably sending comedian friends jokes and them sending stuff back, just because, I mean, that's way more helpful than me doing a mic with just comics, maybe, you know. At least some of the times you're going to need to be able to, even if it's just the comics, to try and tell it as if it were, you know, in that time. You got to get the arithmetic down. But I don't know. I hope this stand up, when we do get back to it, that people will want to come out, like, you know, like after 9/11, how people wanted to come out to see comedy. Maybe we'll have a similar thing, except we've got a pandemic rather than, you know, something that happened that, you know, doesn't cause people to have to wear masks necessarily for a year.
It's going to be interesting, and we'll see. And maybe we'll do drive-in shows. I don't know. Maybe we'll have 20 people at shows and think that's like 200. We'll see.
If we do drive-in shows, I hope we got like someone we hire that has a mask and a megaphone that can stand next to people's cars when they laugh, so we understand if we're doing well or not. You know, like we're going to need, I mean, it's going to be trial and error, all these different ways we're going to try stand up, but hopefully everyone's just self-aware and wants to make it better, and not just doing the whole, well, it worked like that. Let's just do it again, because that shit pisses me off. Make it better.
You know, maybe people have like people in their cars have megaphones or something. Like it could be like there could be some variations on stuff, or like little clackers, or you know, something like that.
They've got their own mics that they're talking into. Like, that was a good one. You know, flipping their switch stuff. What a weird.
It's all very weird, but we'll see. We'll see. Well, thank you, first of all, for your patience. So it was very nice of you to be so patient this evening, and also for all of your insights on this. I think we went through a lot, so really appreciate that.
Just one last thing. I don't know if I said the name of it. The special on Amazon is called "I Didn't Drive Here Either." So if you search AJ DeMello or "I Didn't Drive Here Either," then it should come up, and hopefully it'll be out next week, because that's when it's supposed to be out. So fingers crossed. Hope you guys will like it, and thanks for tuning into the pod.
Yeah, no, and thank you, and I will share all that information, especially connecting this. I think your special will probably bring more people to me than my thing bring it to you, but hopefully, but I will connect it whichever way I can. So I really appreciate that.
No problem.
All right, AJ. Thank you so much. Take care.